The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Orlando, the great city of Orlando. Our offices are right out of South Florida. Orlando is more Central Florida, and we have got a great show. Of course, today it's Kay Bender Rimbaum. You know, I got to tell you, we received so many letters from you over the last, I guess, actually month. And one thing I want to tell you is everybody was asking, where's Alan at? And Alan, let me introduce him to you. Board certified attorney Alan Swartseed. Alan, you have been a busy man the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, you could say that, and hopefully it doesn't show in my eyes, but I'm here. Like I said earlier, I'm back, baby.
Yeah, listen, when they're asking about you, you know you're doing something good. But
I'll
Alan,
take it, man.
yeah, really, Alan's with us today, and people love your enthusiasm. You can tell you love what you do. It's so obvious. Today, I forgot to tell you, on your schedule, we're going to need to start announcing it. The first and second half, people are upset that they miss it if they miss the first half of the show. So I'm going to ask you, we'll be doing the schedule, the first half of the show, your coming dates coming up, and we'll do it again a second time if that's okay. First of all, Alan, tell everybody, and excuse me, let me say, board certified attorney Alan Swartseed. You went through a lot to get to that title.
I did, but you know what? Now it's done, and it's funny the timing that you mentioned it, because just last week I was added to the group of people that's now scheduling the class to teach people how to take the exam.
Wow.
So it went from not being board certified a little over a year ago to now I'm helping people learn. I've been part of that class for 5 years now, teaching about an hour out of a 2-day class. And it's really geared towards either a good refresher for this entire area of law. And this is for attorneys. So if you're not one, you'd be very bored, and I don't recommend it. But for attorneys that want to learn they want to learn the information that's required to be board certified. I've been teaching part of the class for 5 years. Now I'm responsible for setting it up once a year. So it was
it's an incredible title. It's an incredible title that not a lot of attorneys can say that. You're one of the few, and we so appreciate you. Tell everybody about the most incredible, when it comes to community association law, tell people about Kay Bender Rimbaum.
Sure. Well, the firm was formed back in the 90s. We've been around in the state of Florida. I like to say forever, but for a very long time. We've got 23 attorneys, 4 in my office, 8 of whom overall are board certified specialists, including, as Steve mentioned, like me, one who's board certified in construction law. So it's one of those, there's really not a whole lot we don't do. If you're happy with your current attorney, good for you. Stick with them. If one of the things that we mentioned today, your attorney doesn't know the answer to, maybe it's time to find someone who does. And, let's go ahead and ignore if I say I don't know the answer to it, though. But,
you always do.
If you're not happy with your counsel, you don't have counsel, we'd be happy to hear from you. Those of you watching on video, my email is right in the top right of my screen. Those of you who are listening in today, it's as@kbrlegal.com. That's going to be the easiest way to reach me because, as Steve mentioned, I am out of the office often. But the good news is, just like every other nerd, I have my email on my phone. And so I can't promise a response within 24 minutes or 24 seconds, but definitely within 24 business hours.
Alan, I don't know. You probably know this, but because we do so much due diligence, and I'm going to tell you something. First of all, K. Bender Rimbaum, they strictly concentrate in the area of community association. And I'm going to tell you something. That is not the norm. You look at a lot of these law firms that have on their shingle community association law. You'll also see bankruptcy, criminal law, personal injury law, and it's like a total gamut of different areas of law. This is what's so great about K. Bender Rimbaum. You totally concentrate in one area.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it allows us to have the level of expertise that we have, the number of qualified attorneys that we have, because people kind of flock to the others that know what they're doing in any aspect and area of law that they want to practice. And as a result, our clients also see that you might get a cheaper rate somewhere else, but you're not going to get better expertise pretty much anywhere else in the state. So yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. It really is something that we do only focus on community association law. Even when we go outside of that, it's because we're mediating community association law issues instead. So it really is, I'd say at least 99% of everything we do is representing condos and HOAs and co-ops.
I just noticed, I don't know if you saw it or not, over in the comment section, someone's asking us if they're allowed to ask questions. I want to bring something to a lot of people's attention before we get started. We know there's a new bill out there. It hasn't been even signed yet. So we're not going to go into it. Once it's signed, we'll have plenty of time to go into questions about that bill. But we've got so many questions that people have written in. So if you do have a question that doesn't involve about the new bill, yes, we love getting your questions. We have Alan's. I think it's been about 3 months since you've done the show, maybe 2 months.
I had other events the last two, and I was
Yes,
miserable
that's
about
right.
it, but they were
No, it's
both things
okay.
I couldn't
Listen,
give up.
we just replay one of your shows, but we got so many emails for you, and that's what we do here. We take your emails, and we're first of all, we're just so glad that we have such a large audience. This is actually our 12th year with K. Bender Rimbaum, and this is without a doubt the most listened to and watched show of all of our 50 shows. So let's get to asking questions.
All right.
The first question is from Fred in Orlando. Wants to know, do you need a permit to paint your condo building?
Probably not, but you'd want to have either your council, or if you've got a property manager, community manager, have them check with the county to verify. I mean, that's the type of thing. It's not going to be something that's in the Florida statutes. It's going to be a county by county, possibly a city by city analysis. So I would have, frankly, your vendor should know, unless you're physically and personally going out there and buying paint and, getting up on a bunch of pieces of wood instead of having a professional do that, which, by the way, don't recommend it. But, generally speaking, you probably don't. But I would have your vendor verify that, unless you're talking about just painting a house, which still have your vendor verify.
Speaking of painting a house, and we've got hurricane season right around the corner.
Sure do.
Somebody asked me the other day to ask you if the hurricane shutters need to be taken down to do painting. Who pays for those shutters to be put back up?
So generally, if it's the association taking them down, they'll pay to put them back up. But the reality is it's a deep statutory analysis that needs to be done. The statute on this issue literally changed just last July. So we haven't gone through a hurricane season where we really had to worry about it yet, although the change was made mid-hurricane season last year. I haven't seen it come into play where this was really a necessity. Fortunately, being in Orlando makes life a little bit easier because I don't even have hurricane shutters on my house. It really just comes down to that's one that you're going to want to ask your attorney, because a lot of it depends who's responsible for what pursuant to the declaration that determines, based on what the statute says, who's responsible for that replacement. So it's not an answer I can give for everyone, because it depends on who's responsible for the painting and all of that.
Here's William in Winter Garden, and he must have written us for the Tampa show. You don't forget a question like this, Alan. He said, I live in a condo. The owner is also the so-called president. Uh-oh, that's not good when they say so-called.
Okay.
Owns 20 units. They're all full of cats, no people. Each unit has 6 cats. Isn't that illegal?
I don't know that it's illegal. There's nothing that says you can't have a bunch of animals living in a condo unit, but my concern would be whether it's sanitary and whether someone needs to go in there and check to see whether there are, I'll call them biohazards all over the place that might impact common elements, other units, and things like that. That might be a little more difficult when it's the president. And I hear so-called, I don't know what the nature of that comment is, but bottom line, it would be the board really that is entering into the unit to make sure that it's safe. Now, you might call animal control if you feel that the board won't be receptive to your request to have that checked out. If he's the president, that doesn't mean you can't reach out to the secretary or any other director. If you go on sunbiz.org, usually that's going to say who the directors are. If you perform a search, that's the Florida Division of Corporations website. So if you don't already know who your other directors of this community are, you might want to find out who they are and reach out to them. If they're not receptive, they don't do anything about it, and you truly think there are no humans but 6 cats living in each unit, you might want to call animal control and the non-emergency police line and just see, frankly, if anyone is willing to help you out on this.
Gosh, who's got that kind of money to have that many units just for your cats? That's amazing.
Well, I was going to say, Steve, forget about how many units. To have that many cats. I mean, 6 times 19, presuming she lives in one of them. Good Lord.
Unbelievable. Yes. We're going to go to Lon in Orlando. And I got to tell everybody, we've been preaching this for years now. Make sure when you write your questions, which we love, let us know if you're an HOA or condo. I'm seeing about 85% of the emails we get now tell us which one they are. And it does make a difference. So we appreciate that.
And, for now, it makes a difference. In a couple of years, it seems like the legislature is kind of moving towards having similar statutes for both. I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense, but it would make my job easier if I didn't have to check which statute says what.
Exactly.
I don't have it memorized by now. But for now, there are distinctions, and they are enormous in some instances. So yeah,
that's right. You got to do two separate set of laws, don't you? You've got to have.
Well, I mean,
oh my God!
Keep in mind, condo and co-op are very similar as of now, but there are differences between even those two. So you really got to clarify, because otherwise, I might not even be able to respond beyond got to know if you're a condo, co-op, or HOA.
Right. Well, here's Lon in Orlando. He is an HOA. He wants to know, can we use general proxy at the annual meeting for voting?
So what you'll want to do is take a look at your bylaws. That'll probably clarify what kind of proxies you can use. And this is where I get into the distinction between condo and HOA. I think it's the condo statute that says that you can't use a general proxy at the election, but it might be the HOA. I don't recall offhand. So I would look at your bylaws and see that might clarify. And if your bylaws say you can only use a limited proxy, you can only use a limited proxy. If your bylaws don't specify, then you go to the statute.
Alan, here's a term I've never, in all the years we've been doing the show, I've never heard. Jack on Orlando wants to know, what is a notice of commencement?
So it's a construction term in reality. It's basically a document that says, hey, we're working here. But it's recorded in the county public records. It lets everyone know that there's work that's being done, and that until that work is done, there's the possible right of that vendor to have a lien against whatever property is described in the notice of commencement. Those will generally expire a year after they're recorded if there's no separate lien action filed. And there's a lot of construction law that, like I said, we've got someone within the firm who's board certified in construction. So I intentionally limit what goes into my brain to make sure something else doesn't pop right out. When it comes to construction law, I usually rely on him, but it is a construction term. And I see there's another question here. Barbara asks, the president of our HOA has an association credit card. Should the board be reviewing the credit card expenses at every board meeting? Do expenditures need to be approved by the board? Yes, you should be reviewing no matter what delegation has happened regarding authority to use that credit card. Do expenditures need to be approved by the board? The answer to that one depends whether the board has delegated the authority to use that credit card. Usually that'll be by either a vote at a meeting minutes as a result of that, or a board resolution in writing. But if there's been no delegation, that person technically probably shouldn't be using that credit card and, having it paid by the association. Now, keep in mind, this is different from the laws pertaining to debit cards. This is not the automatic theft criminal prosecution, blah, blah, blah. A credit card is okay to use in the association name as of now. Who knows when that loophole will close? But the thing to be aware of is make sure that if someone is using that credit card, the board knows what the charges are and that they're actually association charges and not someone going out and getting dinner and putting it on the credit card. And also make sure that the person that's using it actually has the authority delegated by the board to use that credit card. So thank you for that question, Barbara.
Boy, here's a great question. Just came in.
Okay.
It said, first of all, Alan, I love the way you do the show. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're back. We missed you. That's got to be a cousin of yours. Anyway, they want to know. They said, I understand you come in and make presentations to associations. What are some of the things you go over in your presentation?
So I usually limit coming into a community and doing that type of presentation, that type of kind of seminar to current clients of the firm. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it for other clients, but that's historically been the way that I've done it. The topics are pretty wide ranging. I mean, we do the board certification for HOA, for condo. I'd rather not do the condo certification myself because it's a 4-hour class, but I certainly can. We have classes pertaining to collection of assessments, Fair Housing Act issues, covenant enforcement, updates to your governing documents is one that I just did at 2 trade shows and were very well received. I think we've got roughly 20 to 22 classes that are approved for management credit. Now, the DBPR just opened up from what I understand, and we've been talking about this all year, Steve. The DBPR finally opened up for people to start being accredited to teach the classes that HOAs and condos, the boards need to have by the end of June. Now, I don't know how we're going to get accredited by DBPR, meaning they actually review our course and we teach it by the end of June, because HOAs have to technically have 4 hours of credits or 8 hours if they have 2,500 lots or more. Condos need to have 1 hour of credit, and it's one specific class that we can teach. It's a legal update pertaining to condos. I just don't see how anyone's going to do that this year. But if those are the classes that the question was about, I don't think anyone's authorized to teach those yet, but we do have a list of 20-something classes that we can come in and teach that are not necessarily for credit yet, and that will be for credit if you happen to be a licensed community association manager. So those are the types of things that we do via webinars all year long, and you'll hear later, Steve mentioned it earlier, what our schedule of events look like. If you go to kbrlegal.com under the calendar link towards the top, you'll see everything that's coming up. We've got, it looks like about 8 in the month of June, and I know my buddy Jeff Solomon mentioned just the other day that he hadn't even updated it for June yet.
Wow.
So I suspect we'll probably have closer to 10, 15 classes next month. And I think I'm adding 1 or 2 myself, which has also been dropping off lately and will start to pick up again. So if your community needs that type of class, feel free to reach out. I'm just not promising over the airwaves, so to speak, that I'm going to drive to Tallahassee to teach a class for free. I hope that makes sense.
How's it, the certification class is now 4 hours where it used to be 2 hours. Isn't that right?
So yes, it used to be roughly 2 to 2.5 hours. I know we did it in 2 for condo and HOA. Right now it's taking, because the legislature added content that we didn't have in the class before because it wasn't required and we didn't want to waste anyone's time, adding another half hour to an hour to each class. Right now, the HOA one takes about 2.5 to 3 hours, including Q&A. And the condo one is required specifically pursuant to statute to be 4 hours. So it drastically increased the amount of time that these classes take. And we still teach them roughly once or twice a month, but they are a bit more of a pain to teach now because it takes up a lot more time.
Hey, Alan, do you want to do, Barbara's got a follow-up before we go to
Thank you.
schedule.
Okay, credit cards linked to the checking account and it's on auto pay. Is this legal? No, there's nothing that says that's not legal. And again, Barbara, class on association credit card usage by a board member. I just taught that class. Have your board watch this recording, because in reality, there's not a whole lot that I didn't mention just now that goes into those statutes and goes into the decision-making process.
What about Bonnie Hurd?
Is it legal for an HOA? Hi, Bonnie, by the way. For an HOA board meeting agenda to list committee reports without subjects to be discussed. There was no agenda that had rewrite of governing documents. Well, if that committee is going to report, then that should be sufficient to at least have the committee give the report on literally anything they might wish to give a report on. When it comes to there was no agenda on a rewrite of the governing documents, that would only really matter from my perspective if there's going to be a vote on those documents. And it might have been included in that agenda as a different item than what you're thinking. I would have to take a look at the individual agenda to give a formal opinion, but the reality is it can be somewhat vague. It just can't be not there entirely.
Let's go to the schedule before we go to break.
Sure. So coming up, and I mentioned we probably will have a lot more coming up, but as of right now, June 4th in Weston, we got our legislative session update. June 17th, we've got another one in a webinar, and that is basically the statutes that are potentially changing. And Steve mentioned earlier, we're not getting into it yet because, frankly, we don't know what's going to change.
Right.
Literally just today, I was informed or re-informed that the governor hasn't even seen these bills yet. So the reality is, if it's not on his desk yet and he gets 15 days before he even has to vote on it or let it just pass without vetoing, there's kind of no point in discussing it right now, but there's a point in discussing it 3 weeks from now when it probably will be on his desk.
Doesn't it have to be done by July 1st, Alan?
Generally, yes, but I think the legislative session was extended specifically so that some of these issues could be addressed in better detail.
Okay.
So good question, Steve. Thank you. June 20th, we have an HOA board member certification webinar. June 24th, a condo board certification webinar, the ones we just talked about. June 26th, the 2025 legal update for managers. That's a CEU, and that is basically being taught just so that managers who haven't already taken it can take it at the last minute and get their credits. It will be, when we say the 2025 legal update, those are the 2024 statutes. So don't get all excited that we've got a full class already approved about the changes that came into place in 2025. That one will probably come out in late July, maybe mid-August, depending on when the legislative session ends and when the actual bills start being passed and adopted into Florida law. It might even be late August before we can get DBPR approval to teach that class. We'll schedule it, and you guys will get notified if you're on our mailing list pretty much as soon as those statutes are finalized.
Okay, we're going to go to a break. Alan, tell people how you have a main number that's actually good for any of the offices.
We do. It's 954-928-0680. And you can also call us. The 1-800 number is 974-0680. Either one of those will reach the front desk. The lovely ladies will answer your call and put it through to me if I'm available. So even if you're calling Orlando, Tampa, Palm Beach Gardens, every call gets routed through Pompano.
Bro, you haven't lost a beat yet. I got to tell you, you're still right on. We're going to go to break one, and when we come back, we have more with Kay Bender Rimbaum and your questions.
Thanks.
Kay Bender Rimbaum is a full-service community association law firm dedicated to the representation of community associations throughout Florida. On kbrlegal.com, you can learn more about their offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Tampa, as well as throughout Miami-Dade by appointment. Several Kay Bender Rimbaum attorneys are board-certified specialists in condominium and plan development law and assist clients with all matters of community association legal issues while keeping them up to date on new developments that affect their associations. Kay Bender Rimbaum is also a well-known provider of free legal education for managers and board members. Contact Kay Bender Rimbaum today by calling 800-974-0680. That's 800-974-0680 to reach any of their locations. You can also visit them online at kbrlegal.com or write to them at info@kbrlegal.com.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.
And we are back. I am your host, Steve-O. We're here, for about the next 30 minutes. This is the last Thursday of the month, and that means Kay Bender Rimbaum, Orlando. We have with us board-certified attorney Alan Swartseed, and we have got so many of your questions. And again, feel free, if you have a question that doesn't involve the new bill that doesn't even exist yet, feel free to just write us a note, and we'll try to answer it for you. We're going to go to Ronnie in Winter Garden. He is an HOA. He wants to know, what is an architecture review committee and what are they allowed to approve or disapprove?
So that's a good question. It's essentially a group of people that usually will be appointed by the board and can be removed and replaced by the board. But their primary role is to decide whether you're allowed to do something on your property or not. Now, it's going to pertain mostly to improvements that you're trying to do, whether it's actually an improvement or makes your property look like crap. It's still called an improvement. So any changes or major revisions that you're making to your property, repainting, adding a shed, adding another structure, changing the appearance of your property, adding a screen door, things of that nature, all of that might be provided for in your governing documents. Now, the role of this group is going to be to approve or deny applications as to whether you can make those changes or not. And the statute changed last year to clarify if they're going to deny it, they kind of got to tell you why. So before it was just, nope, you can't do that. And a lot of people responded with, but the governing documents say I can. Why are you telling me no? And they didn't understand, but it's pursuant to a portion of the governing documents you didn't look at. You can't do this. So the legislature, I think it actually makes sense that the legislature added a requirement in an HOA last year in statute 720.3035 that if you're going to deny one of these applications, you actually need to give the citation to the portion of the declaration, the covenants, the other governing documents, which may be your rules and regulations or your architectural criteria, that says this person can't do this. So that actually has to go right into the denial letter. But the purpose of that group, again, is just to approve or deny architectural modification requests.
Sherry in Orlando is a condo. She says, can a president of our board hold more than one officer position?
So the bylaws will generally specify whether the answer to that is yes or no. Usually it's you can't be the vice president and something else, or you can't be the president and something else. But if your bylaws don't specify the president, I don't think there's anything in Chapter 617, which is the Not-for-Profit Act, that specifies. I think you can probably hold as many of those positions as you'd like. So preferably, you're going to have as many people as you have on the board holding officer positions, if not, as many people in officer positions as you can. So if you have at least 4 people on the board, and hopefully you have 5 at that point, but each one of them, in my opinion, should really be an officer of the association. You should have a president, VP, treasurer, and secretary. If you only have 3 people on the board, the answer is obviously you have to have one person doing more than one job. The question is, do the bylaws say you can't have the president also be the secretary or can't also be the treasurer? So long story short, check your bylaws is the answer.
When in doubt, always go. It's amazing. So, Chuck in Claremont wants to know if our condo owner refuses access to a 6-year certification, what can be done about that?
Well, the association has a statutory right of access to each unit to make sure that there's nothing going on in the unit that damages the common elements or other units. So you've got that right to get in. If the owner's refusing, frankly, I've had some communities that had the manager or someone else come with a locksmith and the police after giving notice to the owner that you're just going to go in. And, you change the locks, you give them copies of the key, and you come with the police and a video camera to make sure that there's no false allegations that you stole something while you were in the unit or you damaged something while you were in the unit. But if this is required and none of that works, you might have to file a lawsuit to get what's called an injunction, which is basically a court order that mandates someone to do something, which in this case would be to allow you into the unit to perform the necessary inspection or repairs. So the short answer to that one is you might have to file a lawsuit, but there are things you can do between, send a nice email and actually file that lawsuit.
Looks like we got another question in the chat about governing docks.
And Barbara's back. Thank you for all these questions today, Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara.
Makes the show go really quick.
Yeah.
Governing documents state that checks must be signed by the president and treasurer. Most of the expenses for the association are on auto pay. Is this legal? Probably. It really would depend whether there's a resolution by the treasurer and the president that adopts this practice of putting it on auto pay and allowing it. And candidly, if that's not there, all that president and treasurer would need to do is adopt a resolution or have a vote at a board meeting later ratifying the decision to allow this auto pay. So, I mean, it's on auto pay to benefit the association for the purpose of not screwing up and not making a payment and losing services or breaching a contract. So, I can understand the earlier questions about using credit cards, making sure that it's truly and properly authorized. But this one, it just makes sense to me to use auto pay. Frankly, anything you can do to automate the operation of the association makes everyone's lives easier, including the board and the members. So I'm in favor of it. But again, it should be documented properly, even if that's after the fact.
Here's Rick in Orlando. He said, I've also have a condo in Tampa, so I get to watch both of your shows. He said, "Thank you for all your great information. We had a special assessment passed, and then we got another special assessment. On the second one, I checked the company out, and the construction company doesn't exist. What can I do to find out this company is for real?"
Well, you might find out who the contract is with, whether that's an individual, a corporation, or what. Look them up on Sunbiz, look up their license on the DBPR website and any other licensure website they might have, whether that's a general contractor's license or some other licensure that they're required to have in order to do the work properly. Other than that, you might even just ask the association. If you're not on the board, ask the board, where did you find these people and what do you know about whether or not they are authorized to do the work that they're being contracted to do? Now, the board doesn't necessarily have the obligation to respond to that, but at least you've then put them on notice that they might be contracting with an entity that has no authority to actually perform the work that they're contracted to do. The other thing is, they may be subbing out all of the work, which is not ideal. Even then, my understanding is they should have a general contractor's license to be able to sub it out. But those are some of the things that I would look into, is not just, well, I looked online at one place or I Googled them and I can't find them. I would look at the actual state records and the licensure records to see, can you find them there? I'd also look under Sunbiz to see if they're using a DBA, meaning a doing business as name, and you're just not able to find the corporation because they're operating from a corporation under a separate business name. So there are a lot of things you can do. If none of that helps, I would run it by your attorney if you're on the board. If not, there might not be anything you can do other than ask the association what the heck they're thinking.
I just got a text from a friend of mine who's with one of the companies that your platform is on. And it said, we have over 23,000 people listening to your show right now. Now, we're on 70 platforms.
That's a lot of people with nothing else to do, but I appreciate it.
No, hey, isn't that amazing, Juan? That is really cool. No, he's a very good friend of mine, and he knows we've done a lot of work together. And he said, I thought you might want to know this because they're not real good about giving out numbers like this, but that's pretty amazing for just one platform. It's one of our bigger platforms, but anyhow, let's go to Lori in Orlando. She's a condo. She's there 145 units.
Okay.
Do we need a SERS reserve fund? And Alan, this is a question we get a lot with the levels, because it's supposed to be, I think, 3 levels and up. But people want to know who have garages, who have the first level isn't really a level because they go upstairs. But she says our building is 2 levels. Do they still need a SERS reserve fund?
So if you're 2 stories, I don't care how many units you have, you won't need to get a structural integrity reserve study, which is what Steve's talking about. You won't need a milestone inspection report. You won't need a SERS. Because you're only 2 stories. Now, Steve, you mentioned the 3 stories, and what does that actually mean? Yeah. As of right now, it's stories under the Florida Building Code. The good news, and I said we wouldn't talk about what statutes are coming down the pike, but this is one of the ones I expect to pass, and it's I think it's House Bill 913 that basically would make it so that only condos and co-ops with 3 habitable stories above ground would need to have these things done. So it is one word that's being changed in several portions of the statute that finally would clear this issue up as to who needs it and who doesn't. Now,
is a garage considered habitable? A garage?
I don't know anyone that lives in a garage, but if you think it's habitable, have at it and make that argument. I don't know of anyone that can live. And when we're talking about a garage, keep in mind, generally speaking, when we get this question, it's a parking garage for multiple vehicles. It's not what I have at my house that is supposed to fit 2, but because my wife and I both drive SUVs, fits 1, and there's nothing above it. We're talking about a major fits 50 to 100 or more vehicles in that underground, so to speak, garage, or that first level garage. So again, it's not habitable yet, but the expectation is that in the next few months, the statute will say that it needs to be a habitable story above ground in order for that to count. So if you've got your parking garage with no way of living in that area, and then you've got 2 stories above it, right now you're technically required to have a CERS, you're required to have your milestones. If all that timing of when you're required to have one has hit, as of 2-3 months from now, you might not be required to have one. So I'm not suggesting anyone hold off, because technically some of these things you were already supposed to have by the end of last year. But if you haven't done it yet and you're not really sure what to do, I would suggest you talk to your counsel about whether or not it's a good idea to find someone to do that work now if you haven't already contracted for it.
Okay, let's go to Marcia in Sanford.
Okay.
What can we do to stop investors from taking over? Can we put a limit?
So the answer is yes, but if you've already got a bunch of investors, it may be difficult to get that vote, depending on what your governing documents require. Because what we're talking about here, when you say, can we put a limit, we're really talking about an amendment to the declaration to limit the amount of people who do not live in the community. And you can't really say you can't own the property unless you live in the community. The way around this is generally going to be you can't rent your property for the first 3 years after you buy it. So you have only long-term rentals, no rentals for the first X amount of years after you buy into the community. So you're really disincentivizing rather than completely restricting. The other one that I've seen that can be successful here is you can only have a certain percentage of the units in the community that are rented at any given time. And then finally, the last one it was just on the tip of my tongue, but I was still talking. It was that you can, it'll come back to me. I'm not going to waste your time waiting on me to remember. Okay. But there are things you can do that are the equivalent of saying you can't invest here. But in reality, what you're saying, the other one was you can't own more than a certain amount of units. So a lot of times we talked about the 20 units that are inhabited by cats. That might be because they can't rent them out right now pursuant to the documents. That's the other one that you can use.
That'll turn them off for sure, won't it?
Right. You can only own 2 units in the condo, for example. And that includes all affiliated entities. So it's not, Alan Schwartzide PA owns or Incorporated owns these 2 units, and Alan Schwartzide LLC owns these other 2, and my wife's LLC owns another 2. It's, you put it in the governing documents so that anything affiliated with the same people, you can't own multiples. So those are the 4 ways that I see people trying to work around this, but you can't just say no investors.
Okay.
Because how do you define
Let's go to your schedule one more time.
Sure. So there is, again, quite a lot going on, but the list is June 4th in Weston in person. That's Mike Bender, my partner, that's going to be doing a legislative session update. June 17th, he'll be doing a similar show, but as a webinar. June 20th, we've got the HOA board member certification class. June 24th, the condo. That one might be me. I honestly don't remember. June 26th, legal update for managers, that CEU, that again is the 2024 changes, which means it's the 2025 laws. And again, my guess is by August, we will probably have, if not very early September, we will have the legal update for the changes that are going to take place in July or shortly after of this year, 2025, which will be called the 2026 legal update, even though it won't be 2026 yet. So that's what we've got going on. Again, my guess is we'll add several to that list. There are already more on the list, including our Tampa show and our South Florida show with you, Steve. And would surprise me if there's not 5 or 6 more that get added within the next few days.
I always compliment senior partner Robert K., how important education is to your firm, and you guys sure do prove it.
I appreciate it. We really think it's important, primarily because an educated client usually won't make the mistakes that an uneducated client will make. And if, frankly, they can get some, I can't call it free legal advice because that's not what we provide on these shows or our webinars or seminars. But if they can get a statutory answer or they can get the direction without having to pay for it, it saves a lot of people a lot of time and money, and they'll get the right answer rather than chat GPTing it and inevitably having some hallucination of case law tell them that they should do something that's totally illegal.
We just got a question in. I guess someone who has an electric car. How do we get more electric fueling stations in our community?
Ask for them.
That's it?
That's pretty much it. There is a statute that's directly on point in a condo. I don't think there's one in HOA land, but the statute pretty much dictates what needs to be done in order to get another one and have the association obligated to put another one in. I would just request it. I mean, it might be at your expense, but generally speaking, if I remember what the statute says correctly, because I haven't been asked in about 5 years, it generally says if you ask for one and you're willing to pay for the cost of installing that charging station in a location, even if it's common areas or common elements, since it's a condo, they might have to put it in. So I would just look up the provision in 718, and I candidly don't remember what it is because, again, it's been a couple of years, but it's in there.
Okay. Jill in Altamonte Springs, is the insurance companies going to insure you if you haven't done your CERS?
So there are some that will not. I know that there was, and I candidly don't remember where it landed. There was a proposed change to the statute pertaining to citizens insurance that if you hadn't done your milestone inspection and you were required to have done it, you might not be insured by citizens, or the rate was going to drastically increase. But it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of condos that are required to have these reports done are being told, well, you need to do it 10 years early before you should be required to do it, because we want that report to know that the building is safe in order to be willing to insure you and put that risk in our hands. Not that they're actually going to pay out if something happens anyway, because insurance companies will take your money happily and then tell you, well, that's not covered. But that's generally the way that it works.
Okay. Lucy in Longwood, we love your show. Our entire board never misses your show. We are an HOA annual budget meeting. When should advance notices be made? Annual meeting, how much notice?
So some governing documents, and by the way, if you're an HOA and you watch every show, I really hope you're already a client of our firm. But anyway, the annual budget notice will generally be whatever your governing documents say. Some say 30 days notice, some say less. Generally, my opinion, if you're providing at least 14 days notice, just like you would for a special assessment, that's really all that's required under Florida law. Some people will say it's a 48-hour notice of a board meeting. I would just rather have people not have the opportunity to claim you didn't give enough notice for them to actually evaluate what's in the budget. They might be wrong, but again, 48 hours is generally what the statute requires, just like any other board meeting. But your bylaws, your declaration, they might say you got to give 30 days notice. So I wouldn't just presume that you're safe. I would ask either your manager, your attorney, or do your own investigation of your governing documents. And there's going to be a portion that specifically says how to adopt a budget in your governing documents. That's where you're going to want to look. It might also be in the meeting notices portion. And for the love of God, I hope that you don't have to have a member meeting to adopt the budget. But anyway, so that's, again, I would say at least 14 days, possibly more if your governing documents say more.
Let me get this final question in. I cannot believe the show is already over. She has written me so many times. Tricia in Orlando is an HOA. We received notice that we are faced with special assessment to replace our clubhouse and reserves. Is there anything in Florida statutes on how much the amount can go up?
Not in an HOA, to be in your governing documents. In a condo, there is a statute that limits the increases in your assessments, and it's in very limited circumstances that it even applies. In an HOA, there's no statute that limits how much the assessments can increase, what special assessments can be levied against the members. That's all going to be based on what's in your governing documents. And if your governing documents don't say anything about that maximum increase, there really is none. And when it comes to special assessments, if the board has a legal obligation to maintain or repair or replace something, generally speaking, there's Florida case law that says not only are they allowed, but they're obligated to levy a special assessment in order to be able to fund the work that needs to be done. So if those reserves that you mentioned are real reserves, because HOAs don't have statutory reserves, but if they're required pursuant to your governing documents, your developer established them, or the members voted to establish reserves, those funds should be used for the asset that the reserves are for, and then replenished over time. Whether that requires a special assessment on top of using the reserves, that I can't tell you without knowing your community. But I appreciate the question either way.
Well, I got to tell you, this show always goes by so fast. Tell people how they can reach your office and give them your website also.
Yeah, so the website is KBR, as in K-Bender Rembom, kbrlegal.com. Again, the calendar is right at the link at the top. So if you want to sign up for classes, you can do it right there. The number to reach any of our offices is 1-800-974-0680. And if you'd like to reach me directly, it's as@kbrlegal.com.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.